Hi, welcome to Live from Albany. I'm Joe Spector, the Albany Bureau Chief for the USA Today Network, here with my colleague, co-host, and engineer, John Campbell.
Engineer?
Well, you engineer the whole system here.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I'll let it slide.
All right, well, thank you so much. You know, John and I are admittedly very tired. It was a long week here at the state legislature as they worked through the weekends, Saturday, Sunday, and approved the budget on Monday morning. The assembly was here until about 7 o'clock in the morning, actually, finishing the budget. They kind of wrapped up and got out of town for the rest of the week. They did a day or so thereafter, but we're live on Facebook pages in Rochester and elsewhere in our state. And so we just wanted to give you an update on where things are on the state budget and take any questions and comments you have about what was in it. You know, John, it was pretty substantial. I mean, there was a good amount of stuff that does impact New Yorkers' lives, and that's what we were trying to do in our stories this week. We hope you read a lot of them because there are stuff that will impact people's lives. I mean, I'll start with the property tax cap. You know, that was something that Governor Andrew Cuomo vowed to be in the budget. I asked him on Friday, hey, how's things going with the tax cap? Do you expect it to be in there? He just kind of looked at me and said, there will be no there if it's not there. Right. Basically saying there will be no budget if the tax cap is not in there, and it was.
Yeah, it was, and that's something, it's a permanent extension of the property tax cap. New York's property tax cap limits the property tax levy to 2% of the rate of inflation. It was due to expire next year. Now it's permanently extended, and you know, that was a big win for the governor. Senate Democrats were in favor of that too. Assembly Democrats just kind of had to go along with it.
Yeah, there was no budget deal without that, and you know, just as last thing on the tax cap, it has curbed the growth in property taxes. I had a story this week about who has the highest property taxes in America: Westchester and Rockland counties. Yep. Who has the highest property taxes in America in compared to home values? Well, upstate New York, Binghamton, Rochester, Syracuse. So listen, it's a big issue. The tax cap has been effective in that. Critics will say, you know, why should the state curb our ability to raise taxes if we need to for programs and services? Cuomo has felt otherwise, and the legislature went along with that. Now, permanent in Albany is sort of, you know, you could take it with a grain of salt. I mean, there's nothing to say in a few years they couldn't pass a law to change it, but it does make it pretty clear the importance of the tax cap, how it's a priority for the governor. We could talk about plastic bags. That was a big one this week that they passed. You've written a lot of stories about the impact of the plastic bag ban. You know, everybody has plastic bags, but you ask anybody who supports the measure, and they say it's a real scourge on, you know, on society.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Everywhere you go, you see these plastic bags.
So there's essentially March 1st, 2020 is when this ban is going to take effect. And that means that those grocery bags that you get at Wegmans or Stop and Shop or Tops, whatever grocery store you go to, or Walmart or Target, anywhere where you get these single-use grocery bags, you will not be able to get plastic after March 1st, 2020.
Yeah. Each
county and cities have the option to charge a fee on paper bags, a 5-cent fee on paper bags, with the idea being, well, we're getting rid of plastic, but then people are just going to switch to paper, and then we're just going to have paper litter everywhere.
Yeah, right.
So the counties will have an option to charge that fee. Already you're seeing some counties saying, no way, we're going to charge that fee.
Yeah.
5 cents a bag, that'll make people mad. But plastic is essentially going to be gone. There are a lot of exceptions.
There are exceptions.
If you order a takeout at a restaurant, you'll still be able to get a plastic bag. If you take your dry cleaning to the dry cleaners, you'll still get a plastic garment bag that goes over your garments. Newspapers, your newspaper delivery, that'll still come in a plastic bag. What else? Deli meat. Say you go to the deli counter, you get some Capicola.
You mean gabagool?
You'll still be able to get that.
I
know. You'll still be able to get, you know, plastic bags, single use there. But it's really targeted at those grocery bags that we all know, you know, the 2 handles. Right. And it's supposed to push people toward reusable bags.
Yeah. I mean, there were some questions about whether or not it should be statewide. But, you know, listen, by and large, it was largely supported. It was part of the budget early on. It was in there, and that'll move forward. the couple of other pieces that were important, you know, I wrote a couple of stories this week about, you want to talk about property taxes. Well, the STAR rebate checks that people get to offset their school taxes, which is about 60% or more of their property tax bill. Kind of in the finer print of the budget, they changed the program substantially. Yeah. So if you're an existing homeowner, you get your property school STAR rebate upfront. Say your school tax bill is $6,000. You would pay $5,000. You'd see that $1,000 come off the top when you paid your bill. Well, what the state has increasingly sought to do is make this program a check program where you get a check in the mail. So now what the budget does is go from anybody whose income is $250,000 to $500,000 a year will get a check rather than an upfront savings. And there's some real concerns about that. One, will you get the check on time to pay your school tax bill in most cases at the end of September? Two, if you're paying your escrow, right? Now the bank's gonna say, okay, your school tax bill is $6,000. That's what we have to pay. You might end up paying us, say, another $100 a month in your mortgage, and then wait for the check.
Yeah. And go ahead.
No, just three. This is all in an effort. The state says it's a more streamlined process. Maybe it is to some extent, but seems the main reason why is because the state can move it to a different part of its ledger.
Yeah, it's a bookkeeping thing. They can essentially, it's not counted. Correct me if I'm wrong. No. It's not counted as revenue.
Well, it's not counted as spending. So
I'm sorry, that's what I meant.
Right. So when you're getting it up front, the state counted it as spending because the state has to pay it up. Whereas now, if you get a check, it's like a credit. It comes off the state's revenue.
We've got some people weighing in with some questions here. John watching in Rochester. Hi, John. He says he's about the plastic bag ban. He says this is going to make people buy less at the stores because who wants to pay for the bags? So basically, who's going to get hurt by this are the grocery stores, and the grocery stores were very much opposed to this. Wegmans, in particular, was opposed to it. Wasn't enough to get it through to oppose it. You know what I mean? Right. It still got through.
Right. So. Right. Yeah. I mean, will people buy less at the grocery stores because they don't have a plastic bag? Well, I guess you come in with your own bags, and you know, what do you do otherwise? I mean, you might have to end up getting a paper bag, I guess, if you didn't bring enough bags with you.
Yeah, and if you have, this was a question that was on the Senate floor too. If you do, if you are like you or I who have a large storage of these plastic bags that you've saved over the years, you can bring those to the store and use those. But anything reusable is what they're trying to.
I could show up with the 50 bags I have in my house and still use them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting.
John watching in Rochester, he asked too. You know, he says, "Hi, I'm a photographer that participates in local craft shows. How will the plastic ban work for me for next year?" So it applies to essentially stores that pay taxes, right? That collect a sales tax, and it essentially applies there. There are exceptions in there for bags that are purchased in bulk, right? Say you buy 100 bags or a pack of 1,000 bags that are used to pick up dog waste. That's not banned. You can still buy those. So if you're buying paper bags and using them to package up, your craft, selling at a craft show, I think this probably does not apply to you. But it applies to the way the law is written. Is it applies to stores essentially that collect sales tax?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's one we need to maybe just nail down for sure. But I think that's I think you got it right.
Paul watching in Rochester, he wants us to address why the New York State government couldn't do public campaign financing and campaign finance reform. Didn't the Democrats previously say they would get this done if they had control of the Senate, Assembly, and Governor?
Great question. I mean, people are very engaged. Yeah, really engaged, and we should note that. So what didn't they do? We would say first and foremost would be marijuana, legalizing marijuana. And we'll get into that in a minute. But just back to the question, two other things they essentially punted on. Congestion pricing, and as he noted, public financing of campaigns. They're going to set up two commissions now to look, one at congestion pricing in Manhattan,
well, they punted on the toll as part of congestion pricing in Manhattan.
Who will pay the toll, where the toll will be exactly, what bridges will be exempt. There's a lot of questions there on that.
And the other, what Paul's asking about is the public campaign financing piece, which is essentially, the governor and the Assembly and Senate, the Democrats in both, have said for years that they support matching system, right? Where if I were to donate $100 to my local mayor, it would be matched 6-to-1 with public funds. And a lot of people hear that and say, whoa, why should taxpayer funds be going to fund political campaigns? Right. But other people, supporters of that, say, well, listen, what you're doing is you're making the small donor more valuable to the politicians. So they will seek small donors rather than the big money donors who really can influence them. And Andrew Cuomo, and for instance, relies very, very heavily on big money donors, people that contribute $50,000 at a time to him. This would the idea, supporters say, would be to shift the focus to small donors. Now, they created a commission. They couldn't agree on the details, so in order to get an on-time budget, they created a commission that has until December 1st to come up with a structure that will take effect if the legislature doesn't step in to stop it.
Right.
So, but they punted, essentially.
They punted. And so there's a couple questions on that. One, will these commissions essentially do what Cuomo wants them to do? Obviously, we've seen commissions in the past face criticism that they basically did what Cuomo wanted them to. And you could go down the litany of those, right? So there's one there. And two, will the legislature take any steps to prevent it? And, how will this come out? A couple of things that Cuomo alluded to is, okay, should it be a 6-to-1 match in Rochester? The same as New York City, when a campaign to run up in Rochester is going to be arguably a heck of a lot less.
Yeah, a television ad in Rochester costs a fraction of what a television ad in New York City costs.
So should they get 6-to-1 or should they get 3-to-1? Yeah. That's what this commission is going to figure out. Also, one of the things that concern some third parties is whether they'll get rid of, quote unquote, fusion voting, which would be to get rid of these third parties, where now if you're on 5 lines, you count all the lines together and that's your vote total.
Yeah, and if you get rid of fusion voting, then third parties like the Working Families Party or the Conservative Party,
Independence Party,
they would have to have their own candidates on the ballot, and their governor candidate would have to get 50,000 votes to stay on the ballot in New York, which is a valuable thing to have ballot space for every election in New York. I mean, that is very valuable.
Powerful.
Marianne wants to know about the raising taxes. She says she's claiming that Cuomo is raising taxes to support his ridiculous pay raise. So there's 2 things in there. One, there are some new taxes and fees in this budget that you had. And 2, there was a middle of the night into early morning vote on the governor's pay raise. Can you take us through the taxes first? Or some of them.
Yeah, there are several new taxes in there. First and foremost, we're going to find out about congestion pricing, right? What will be the new tolls on that? We talked about the plastic bag, that there might be a fee on plastic bags. We talked about what's the other big one? Oh, the internet sales tax. It's a tax, because a lot of times people are not being taxed on sales tax. Related to online sales from third-party vendors. Those are some of the big ones.
It's like Amazon Marketplace, right? Sometimes you go to Amazon and you buy directly from Amazon. Other times you're on Amazon and you're buying from a third party, and Amazon's kind of acting as the middleman.
Right.
It's those ones, the middleman transactions, where you'll be charged sales
Sometimes they're on sales tax. Downstate already has this. There's like a surcharge put when you rent a car. Well, now they're going to extend that to upstate. That money's going to go to the regional transit authorities,
right?
And that's something that the regional transit groups supported.
We should say the congestion pricing too. That is only in Manhattan. And that's going to launch in 2021.
Midtown.
Yeah, it's essentially 61st Street or 60th Street and below.
I like the way you put it. Central Park South.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, a little sliver of Central Park's included, but it's essentially Central Park South.
Yeah, right.
South of Central Park. The question about the pay raise, yes, that did happen. At 2:45 a.m., the New York Senate voted to increase Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Were you up?
And I was up. Yeah, I was. I was up for that one. But then the Assembly voted after 6 a.m. After going throughout the night. I was not up for that one.
Right.
But they voted to increase the governor's salary this year to $200,000 from $179,000 last year. Next year, it'll go to $225,000. The year after, it'll go to $250,000. That almost certainly will make him the highest paid governor in the entire country. That goes back to, there was this pay commission that lawmakers, we talked about punting to a commission.
Right.
Last year, lawmakers and the governor couldn't come into an agreement on a pay raise, so they created this commission to recommend one that had the force of law eventually.
Yeah.
And they did. Lawmakers got a pay increase, but the problem is for the governor, the state constitution says it has to be set by a joint resolution of the Assembly and the Senate. That's what happened in the middle of the night on Sunday into Monday.
Right, and we should note your mini documentary on the two senators.
That video was 1 minute long. I'm not sure we can call it a mini documentary.
Well, it was like an instant replay of what transpired there. But you should read John's story about how two Hudson Valley state senators, Jen Metzger and James Skoufis, all of a sudden had to go to the bathroom at the time of the vote, right?
Well, Skoufis says he was in the bathroom, but listen. This highlights what a tough vote this was for lawmakers.
She didn't say where she went, right?
Yeah. So when the pay raise vote, the vote for Cuomo's pay raise came up, two senators were absent, Metzger and Skoufis, and then we were able to see on the Senate's video feed they were packing their seats within 3 to 4 minutes back to their seats. So they were out of the chamber for the vote. The vote was done, and they were right back in their seat.
Yeah, and that's all. And that's that's okay. They were gone. Fine. But I think the larger point of your story was that they were noted as absent,
right?
And they will not say whether or not they would have voted for it.
Yeah. And so Skoufis says he was in the bathroom, sure, but he can tell us how he would have voted, and not to mention you can go to the desk of the Senate immediately after a vote and correct the record, so to speak. There was no effort to do that.
No.
So
and
it raises the question of whether they intentionally skipped the vote. And it also, they won't say how they voted on it.
And there were some members who were very clear. They didn't vote for him. They said no, and they gave their reasons why.
There were 2 Democrats in the Senate and a handful in the Assembly.
And there was one who was initially voted as absent.
Yeah, and who was able to get his vote corrected.
Yeah.
That was Luis Sepulveda. April weighed in, watching in Rochester. She weighs in on a couple different things. She says people who take mass transit, bus, or trains are going to struggle. That is, the idea behind congestion pricing in Manhattan is to drive people from cars into mass transit.
Right.
And the idea is to cut down on emissions, but it's also to raise a lot of money to improve the public transit.
I know it's kind of this double-edged sword. They're pushing people to take mass transit, but at the same time, the mass transit system needs billions of dollars of upgrades, and all you got to do is look on Twitter every day and see people complaining about the delayed subway. So, I guess their point is if we're going to push people to mass transit, it has to be improved.
Yep. And I mean, listen, there's a twofold reason for doing this, according to supporters. One is, to cut down on congestion, but really, they needed $15 billion to fund this plan to bolster the New York State subway system. They're not going to get $15 billion from the tolls initially. They're going to get enough to borrow.
Yeah, right. It's like an IOU on it almost.
Yeah.
But then Cuomo's point as to why he did congestion pricing, he said the alternative is raise fares and tolls 30%. So this was the alternative there.
Yep, absolutely. So
very good. Well, listen, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for your comments. Look for our stories this weekend and all week. We've had stories about what was in the budget, who was there and who wasn't there for certain votes. Wegmans bags. There's a story about that as well.
Yeah. That was maybe that's another tale for another time. But a certain Long Island senator didn't seem to know what Wegmans was, and when Rich Funky, the Rochester senator, said, "Well, what do I do with my old Wegmans bags?" He heard old white man's.
Yeah, so there's a good video online you can watch on that. But anyway, thanks so much for joining us live from Albany. We'll be here every Friday at noon. Thanks.